everyone, welcome to From Shambles to Shambhala. I'm Zia, this is Sophie, and welcome to this month's show. And this month we're a little bit later than usual in releasing the video, and that's just because we wanted it to come out during the 28th Gene Key. And the 28th Gene Key is all about facing our deepest fears, facing death. And it's so interesting how it actually leads into Halloween, All Hallows, Samhain. We really want to honor our ancestors at this time of the year. The veils are very thin, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. We'll have a little ceremony. And so if you stick with us to the very end of the show, we'll have a little candle lighting ceremony to honor them. Right now we'll turn this over to Peter to see what's going on energetically and in the world, and we'll catch up with you a little bit later on.
Hi everyone, welcome to From Shambles to Shambhala. October the 28th in the 28th Gene Key, the darkest Gene Key of them all. But before we get into the 28th Gene Key, let's just chat a little bit about the developments taking place over this month. It's one of those rare months where we have two full moons. The first was on October the 1st, and the second is on Halloween on October the 31st. And the second full moon in a month is called a blue moon. And this particular moon is in a very strong, powerful energy, because it is conjunct Uranus in Taurus. And Uranus is all about our personal freedom and often unexpected and shocking events that set us free into that freedom. And so with the full moon illuminating the Uranus energy, we need to expect the unexpected to come up in the next few days. We're already in the force field of that full moon. So basically anything could happen. And Mercury is coming to the end of its retrograde motion. It started its retrograde in Scorpio and has now moved back to late Libra and will station direct on the same day as the US election and start moving forward again. So Mercury in retrograde in Scorpio is all about unearthing what needs to be revealed. And because it's Scorpio, it often has a sexual connotation. So I suspect we are going to continue to see revelations coming up, shocking news, shattering news to expose things and people that have taken place. And the Uranus in Taurus is all about these sudden and unexpected shocks. And because it's in Taurus, it's about the earth itself. So there could be some major earth tremors that take place. There could be earthquakes within the political system as well, for example. So we're in very, very intense, deep, penetrating times to bring everything to the surface to be released. Which brings me into the 28th Gene Key, which begins on the 25th of October and goes right through and finishes on Halloween. And I'm never sure how much Richard Rudd planned this, or it just synchronistically fell into place. But you couldn't have a more significant Gene Key for Halloween than the 28th. Because the 28th Gene Key is having to face your deepest fears. And if you imagine all the ghosties and ghoulies and demons that come out on Halloween and put them all into one demonic being, Richard calls that the egregore of fear. And it's about having to face your deepest fear, which usually surrounds something to do with death. And it can be a near-death experience that you yourself has had. It can be someone who has died, who is close to you at a particularly important time in your life. Or it could just be your own fear of death and dying. And the shadow of this Gene Key is purposelessness, which means as a result of that fear, as a result of those experiences, you get to that place of helplessness, hopelessness, purposelessness, where you think, what's the point? Why should I bother? What is the point of me doing this? And so it can lead to this living a half-filled life where you don't really go for the gusto and you sort of dry up in fear of your mortality. The more reactive nature of the 28th gene key is to take life on and become a daredevil, like an evil Knievel, where you basically say to death, okay, take me, and so you move into this very risky behavior. And so what we're wanting to do is to move somewhere down the middle and move into this life of complete and total fulfillment. The gift of the gene key is totality. And this is about an absolute and total acceptance of absolutely everything that happens in your life as part of your sacred journey. It reminds me a little bit of the Fool in the Tarot, where he starts out on the journey at the beginning, has no clue what's going to happen, and then has all of these different experiences, the tragedy and the comedy, the magnificence, the horrible, all wrapped up into what we call life. And so the 28th gene key is about embracing all of that takes place and stepping into this place of wonder and awe at what is taking place, even in the difficult moments. But probably the most significant aspect of the 28th gene key is what is called the shamanic death, which is dying to your old way of being before you can fully live your life. It's letting go of all of the old patterns and systems that we were trained into, that we were conditioned into, letting all of that go and opening ourselves up to a higher frequency. So in the shamanic death tradition, you have to die before you can fully live. And so you come back having died to your old self, faced your own death, faced your mortality, and reborn back out into life. From which point on, you can just live this life of the magical, mystical journey of just following the synchronicities and living in joy abandon of your life and what comes up. And whatever comes up is coming up to show you something you need to see. So there's a total acceptance of this as you move forward in your life. And the highest expression of the 28th gene key is the opposite of the fear of death and mortality. It is immortality. And it is recognition that we don't actually die. We simply go through a transition of life into a different dimension and a different way of being in our existence, different to our physical existence. And I always see it as the retention of consciousness through that death moment. So when you shed your physical body, that your consciousness remains as you cross over the void into other realms and dimensions, so that you retain memory and consciousness through the process. And then having spent some time in the afterlife, in the heaven worlds, making your return back into physical embodiment, retaining full memory and consciousness. And for me, that's how I see immortality. It's the ongoing existence that we live with our true conscious nature. So it is this very deep, dark, shamanic journey that we need to go on. And we have to confront those deepest fears that we have, and in particular confronting our own death. And many people on a spiritual journey have been forced to face that as a result of serious illness that has come their way. And many of those people will say that it was the best thing that ever happened to them, because it took them into that deepest place of looking into themselves to see their real purpose for being here on the planet. So that's the 28th gene key that goes through to Halloween. And then we shift into the 44th gene key, which is my personal life's work. My birthday is November the 1st. And this is about the clear current flow of energy through. And this is while the American election is taking place. And just prior to the 28th gene key, we had the 50th gene key, which is coupled with the 44th in what's called the Ring of the Illuminati. So all that's being revealed right now is to bring out of the shadows all of the corruption and greed on the planet, so that we can move into this completely crystal clear, transparent way of living in the world in the future. I do believe we've got a couple more weeks of challenging revelations and dysfunctionality and chaos coming to the surface. But by the 14th of November, things should start to ease off. Mars has been in retrograde motion for a long time, going through its own sign of Aries, the warrior, and on the 14th of November it makes its shift into direct motion. Just before that, there is the final of a 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions, which I also believe will lead to an expansion of the transformations that we need to be going through at this time. So hang on to your hats. I think we've got another couple of weeks of challenge, and then I think we'll see things will begin to ease off in the middle of November, moving through to what I believe is going to be a wonderful conclusion in the week of December the 14th to the 21st. So I wish you well on your journey through these times. Try to stay calm and centered, as all about you are losing it, and just try to avoid any confrontations, any difficult situations. Seek your own counsel and just hold to your own inner truth as this all unfolds.
So as the days become shorter and the nights become longer at this time of year, the veils really begin to thin, and connection with our ancestors becomes a lot more possible. In fact, you might have already felt them around you. You might be receiving messages, subtle signs coming through, invitations to communicate. We really want to honor our ancestors, not just at this time of the year, but all year round, just to be aware and conscious of them. And when we don't pay attention, there's always the possibility that they will attempt to live through us. So we honor them in their lives and what they've contributed to this sweet earth and to our own rich lives. And by doing so, we can work together. And we can do that by creating an altar in our home in a special corner where you can just create a sacred space. You can add pictures of them, symbols, mementos, whatever you want, whatever you feel called to do. I just felt called to be outside for this little ceremony and to really connect deeply with the ancestors of the land here, as well as my own ancestors. Another way that we can connect with them is just to remember their lives and to share their stories. And perhaps those stories have been handed down from generation to generation, also from our own memories of our grandparents, our close relatives who have passed on before us. In my case today, I just feel really called to share a story of my cousin Frank. Frank was a very special soul. He was here for a short time, but he sure made his mark. His life really resonates with the 28th gene key. In fact, recently I just looked up his gene keys profile, and sure enough, his core wound vocation was the 28th gene key. And so for those who are familiar with the gene keys profile, the core wound is actually our ancestral wounding. And so we come here to become conscious of that wounding and to work with it and to embrace it. And by so doing, it transforms into the gifts, and then the siddhi, the highest essence, can come through. And I really feel that Frank achieved that in his lifetime. When Frank was quite young, he was very close with his grandparents, especially his grandfather. And when his grandfather grew old, he was by his side, and he was there when he passed away. And his grandfather's death made a huge, huge impact on Frank and his life, and he became completely obsessed, in a way, with death and overcoming it. He had two great passions in his life. The first was filmmaking, and he was also very much in love with the desert, and he also very much lived that archetype that we talk about with the 28th gene key of the daredevil who confronts death in almost everything that he did. He wanted to make a film about crossing the Sahara Desert, and it would be about confronting death every step of the way. And he did. He spent many years in intense training to prepare. He was on a special diet. He was a weightlifter. And then in 1990, he made the crossing. And it wasn't easy. He chronicles it in his film Life Without Death. All he had was a camel and his camera, his beloved Bolex camera. And he succeeded with that crossing. He made the Guinness Book of World Records that year, and he spent the next 10 years editing that film. And finally, we were all so eager to see it, and it finally came out in 2000, and I saw it at the Vancouver Film Festival, and I was just blown away by the whole experience and the fact that he had actually survived it. And I really wanted to talk to him about it. I had so many questions. I had so many questions for him because I had a great interest in film myself, and the desert as well, and I understood his love for that particular landscape. And I never had a chance to, because when that film came out, he was already back in the Sahara Desert attempting his second crossing, which was much more ambitious, and he was going to make another film. But unfortunately, he never made it through that journey. He was about 70 kilometers from Timbuktu and was murdered by bandits. They stole everything, the camera, the film, everything that he had, and his body was found a few days later. And that had been his greatest fear, to die that way, and yet he lived his life right on the edge of death all the time. So the irony there, that really comes through the 28th gene key, is that we run from death and we also run from life. But with Frank, he met life head on, and he was always aware of his death. It was right there on his shoulder, guiding everything that he did. So he lived with an incredible intensity. He embraced his mortality by denying it in a way, and he wanted to be immortal. He talked about that. It comes through in his films, and I really feel that he achieved it through his films and through the mythology that lives on as well, and the stories that people tell, and through the love in our hearts from his family. One little story that came through from his cameraman from another journey to the desert years before. After Frank died, several months later, the cameraman had a dream that he was in the Sahara Desert and Frank was walking towards him. And Frank said, "Don't worry, Jean-Luc. I am happy." This has been a really difficult video for me to make. The 28th gene key is in my own profile twice, and so it really hits close to home for me. They believe that Frank was killed just before Halloween in the year 2000, probably around the 28th of October, around this time of year. And I lost a lot of people in my family around that time in 2000. And for me, my father passed away a few months later, my aunt, my grandmother, my uncle, a lot of people. And it was just like a mass exodus in my family. And it really propelled me on my path. And I ended up taking my shamanic training shortly after that because I really wanted to understand death and to consider death my ally in life. I just wanted to understand death so that the grief wouldn't have the intensity that it did. And obviously it's still there. It's a very sensitive spot for me, as it is with so many of us. And it's a daily thing, working with these gene keys, particularly these deep dark ones like the 28, and just knowing that those deep dark ones have the greatest light within them. And so we'll light a candle for our ancestors. We remember them with so much love and gratitude, and we also hold the light for the ancestors of the land where we live, and we invite them to come in to a relationship with us where we can hear each other through the sounds of nature, through the winds, and we invite them to come and guide us in this life and to co-create with us. And so we're just going to go back to this beautiful cedar tree. There's a gorgeous little indentation in the center of it, and we'll light our candle there. We love you. We thank you so much for your life. And we remember you always. Bless you all, everyone. See you next time. Bye.